So Doc Rivers has been at the topic of discussion over the NBA for the past couple days for a lot of good reasons. And I know that when Doc Rivers originally became the Bucks head coach, I never really made a video about it. So this is that video and what's going on right now. And I'm low-key kind of glad I didn't talk about it when he first got hired, because what the fuck, I was absolutely right. So over the past week, Doc Rivers has somehow started a beef within the NBA community, and I'm not that surprised, because I'll never understand how a coach like Doc Rivers continues to get jobs and opportunities when he doesn't deserve them at all. I mean, him getting the head coaching job of the Bucks in the middle of the season, it never made any sense to me. Now, according to Doc Rivers, he was working as like some specialist coaching assistant, whatever, blah, 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 some bullshit role with the Bucks. And according to him in a recent interview, he didn't even want the job. Now, listen, I'm not an NBA coach. I'm not an NBA GM. I'm just someone that talks about basketball. But I don't know, isn't it a little bit concerning that the head coach didn't even want to coach the team in the first place? And honestly, if you didn't even want to coach the team that bad, why did you take the job? You're only making things worse. Which tells me two things. One, Doc Rivers is about to destroy Giannis' chances at winning a ring for the next however long he's on the team. Or B, this man is lying out his ass. Which I think that is the narrative that a lot of people are going with, because they're saying, oh, well, if the Bucks were doing good, then you'd probably be like, yeah, this was my idea. Because we noticed that Doc Rivers doesn't take accountability. Doc Rivers loves to blame other people for his mistakes and his wrongdoings. One time, Doc Rivers was asked about the Los Angeles Clippers when they blew that 3-1 lead, and he said, oh, we weren't talented enough. We weren't a good enough team. So you mean to tell me prime Chris Paul, prime Blake Griffin, JJ Redick, who was at one of the best parts of his career, prime DeAndre Jordan, and a pretty solid rotation, you mean to tell me that wasn't good enough to win? That is some of the biggest bullshit I've ever heard in my life. I mean, if you want another example, let's talk about a game that literally just happened like last week. So last week, the last game before the All-Star break, the Bucks and the Memphis Grizzlies were playing in a game. Now, I need to remind you of something. The Bucks were mostly healthy. The only person they were missing was Hood Genius's Pookie Bear, Chris Middleton. Other than that, they had just about everyone healthy and ready to go. However, on Memphis's side, things are kind of different, because they had G Leaguers and two-way players on the roster. They didn't have a starting lineup that was normal to what they usually have. And that's because mostly everyone on their team is injured right now. It's not going good in Memphis. I mean, their best player was probably GG Jackson, which, to be fair, that guy's been going off lately, and I'm definitely a fan. But still, comparing that to the Bucks quote-unquote super team that was created, this should be a piece of cake. I mean, the Bucks have been struggling ever since they got Doc Rivers, but all you have to do is get this one win, go into the All-Star break on a little win streak, and then you have momentum. And I actually sat down and I watched this game with Will So Trill and 2-for-1, and as I watched the game, I wasn't surprised that the Bucks lost this game. Arguably the easiest game you could have won, you somehow lost. And I know Doc Rivers isn't physically out there, he can't control everything they do on the court, but I am sorry, the fact that after that game you decided to say our players, they were in the right mind space. Dude, shut the up. I find it very ironic that they started struggling as soon as Doc Rivers got to that team, and not just struggling like, oh, we lost a game here, we lost a game there. No, their record is atrocious. Currently, Doc Rivers has coached 10 games with the Bucks, and in those games he is 3-7. And I think Low made a video on one of his channels about the Doc Rivers hiring and how after a couple games in, he was already showing he was going to be bad. And I remember people in the comment section, they're like, oh, you haven't watched Bucks games, you don't know what you're talking about, all these different things. And I was like, maybe he didn't. Maybe Low didn't take the time to watch these Bucks games before he made his video. But guess what? As someone who is a Giannis fan, as someone who is in a group of people that are all Giannis fans, and one of my best friends is connected to Bucks Twitter, I watch Bucks games all the time. I know that Doc Rivers isn't the only reason this team has been struggling. For example, I made a video about it, but Damian Lillard, he was going through a slump. And I'm not gonna lie, after the way he looked in the three-point contest and All-Star weekend, I don't know, maybe this is momentum to go into the season with something. Maybe after the All-Star break now, Damian Lillard is going to go back to normal. Maybe Giannis is going to do his thing. Maybe Chris Middleton will get back to being healthy. Patrick Beverley is going to be seen as a great pickup, and they fix things. However, that's cool. I know they're going to make the playoffs. No one is doubting them doing that. But my thing is, I know how this ends, and I think you all do. Because here's the thing. I don't want to hate this team. I don't want to doubt this team. But I'm sorry. With Doc Rivers as your head coach, I'm not confident in you as a team. I literally made a tweet right after I found out Doc Rivers got hired. I was like, yeah, I got to take back what I said said, Milwaukee's no longer the best team in the NBA. And guys, I'm trying not to doubt Milwaukee. I really don't want to be right about this, but I'm sorry. I've seen this ending too many times for me to be fooled. You cannot fool someone who has seen this for over a decade. I was in middle school when I knew Doc Rivers was one of the worst coaches in the NBA, and I don't understand how this man keeps getting opportunities. I know that his 2008 ring must hold so much value, even though that's got to be one of the most fraudulent coaching rings of all time. And let me rephrase what I'm saying. I'm not saying the Celtics team, I'm not saying they were frauds. They were obviously a super team. They were a great team, but Doc Rivers getting credit for that win is a joke if you ask me. Number one, like I said, they were a super team. If that Celtics team did not win, I feel like a lot more questions would be asked instead of answered. And I know people talk about their defense. It was great. Oh, Doc Rivers, he's a defensive specialist. Well, don't y'all remember that Tom Thibodeau was on that coaching staff? Are things starting to line up for you? The one thing I could try to not take away from Doc Rivers is that he's consistently making the playoffs, and in my opinion, that's a good thing. Now, granted, if you're a team that is championship contenders, I don't think you should be like, oh, our ceiling is making the playoffs. Yes, he does consistently make it, but look at the teams he's coached. That Clippers team, great team. They were supposed to make it. When he went to the 76ers, they were one of the best teams in the East always, and they were supposed to be. I mean, even after he left, they're still a great team in the East. It's nothing has changed. And now the Bucks. Now I know technically he took over mid-season, but let's face it, if they did come into the season with Doc Rivers, I have a weird feeling they'd stay the same. But the point I'm trying to make is that Doc Rivers is consistently getting good teams to coach with. And when those teams do kind of okay, Doc Rivers gets credit. But when shit goes down and things end bad, Doc Rivers has to point the finger to somebody else. It's exactly what JJ Redick has been saying, and a lot of people have been trying to flame him. Patrick Beverley called him out. I think Austin Rivers tried to call him out. And I'm not even going to respond to Austin Rivers or even clown him because that's his pops. I can't be mad at that. Even if my dad was in the wrong and someone said some shit about him, I'm gonna defend my pops. I understand what you're doing and I'm not mad at you. Even though I cringe when I watch Austin Rivers on TV, which let's face it, I don't watch NBA media anymore. But the Twitter clips that I see of him, I cringe 95% of the time. But this time, I'm not gonna say much about it. But Patrick Beverley, I expected better from you. And the funny thing is, Patrick Beverley is always someone who I know can keep it real, but I think this is one of the rare times where he's not keeping it real, because the only reason he's defending him is because that's his head coach. What, you mean to tell me if Pat Bev talked about the situation in a negative way, that Doc Rivers isn't gonna be like, you're on my fucking team, right? Let's be fucking serious. If Pat Bev was still in Philly, a part of me does believe that he would either stay silent on the situation or he would agree with the shit that JJ is saying. And I know some people hate JJ Redick, which to each their own, but let's face it, JJ Redick, ever since he's become a member of the media, he's consistently been someone who's kept it real with us. And this is one of those times where I genuinely believe what JJ Redick is saying. So in conclusion, I'm not surprised that people are coming for Doc Rivers, and I'm not surprised that the Bucks are going to go into the playoffs, and I don't know if they're going to do well. I don't care if the fucking Bucks win the next 26-27 games. I don't care, because come playoff time, I don't trust Doc Rivers at the head of this ship. I genuinely believe the Bucks are going to fail when it's all said and done, and I fucking hate that. And you know what? I hope people come back to this video sometime in July and the Bucks end up winning the NBA Finals. I hope that happens. But I'm sorry, I've seen this ending too many times, and I know I keep repeating that, but it's the truth. And trust me when I say, when Doc Rivers fails, which I know he will, that Doc Rivers video that I'm going to be making is going to hit like crack in the 80s. I mean, I've never done crack, but it's going to hit, trust me.